I'm really relieved to have finally reached Death Takes a Holiday on Ice, because there are a few things with this episode that I want to talk about, things that happened in the run-up to the production of the episode, and I actually want to share a quote from James Burrows' book. I don't usually share quotes from Burrows' book because I don't want to give away too much, I don't want to spoil much, I really thoroughly recommend the book, but it's important to discuss within the context of something that happens in this episode, so I'll talk about that quite soon, actually. It happens early on in the episode, and then there are a few things later on. This episode is the 7th episode of the 8th season of Cheers. It is directed, of course, by the wonderful James Burrows, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts, and talk a little bit as well about the events surrounding the creation of this episode. Starts off with Rebecca complaining about the high phone bill. Norm suggests doing what everybody else does and just uses Cheers' phone. And Cliff so happens to be on the phone at the time, and Rebecca rather aggressively cuts the phone cord. It was a nice, fun way to start things off. Carla is then in awe of the fact that Sam is talking with Red Sox player Darryl Mead, played by Kevin Conroy. She does some flirting, he asks her out, and she's about to say yes, she'll go to dinner with him. And then she remembers she's married. He gives her his phone number, nevertheless, and she gives it to Rebecca to never give to her. Interesting that she's giving it to Rebecca to keep and not getting rid of it. It clearly still means a lot to her. And then she gets a call from the ice show, thinking it's going to be yet another excuse from Eddie for why he can't come home. And, well, technically it's an excuse for why he can't come home. And we get a bit of suspense for a couple of minutes. Carla seems not to have a lot of emotion. Maybe she's a bit fed up during the phone call, but other than that, she's not giving anything away. And then a couple of seconds later, we find out Eddie is dead. There was a freak accident during the ice show, or I guess just after the ice show. They were cleaning up after the Penguin salsa number, and the cleaning machine was about to maul down or cut up one of the penguins, and Eddie pushed him out of the way just in time to save that person, but unfortunately that killed him in the process. And I guess technically he died a hero, and I have some thoughts on that which I'll discuss a little bit later, but I do want to discuss just now why they killed off Eddie, because this is quite interesting and frustrating, and it's something that I've really struggled with rewatching Cheers and reviewing the episodes with Eddie leading up to this. It's been very difficult to share my thoughts on Eddie without being able to discuss this, because I didn't want to spoil anything. So I'm very relieved that we've reached this point and I can talk about it. So basically, J. Thomas, who played Eddie, was written out of the show. And I will explain why with a quote from James Burrows' book in a moment, but I wanted to point this out specifically because IMDb seems to say, well, IMDb says, and I quote, Thomas suggests the reason was that the studio only wanted to keep either him or Baby New Earth and opted for New Earth. That quote from IMDb, I don't know where it comes from, I don't know who wrote it, but that is the only time I have ever heard that. The quote, well, that section in the trivia bit does actually mention that it was because of something J. Thomas said. And I will just read in Burrows' words what actually happened, according to James Burrows, but I have heard this from other sources as well. And Burrows says, Jay was a stand-up comedian and a disc jockey and was still on Power 106 radio in Los Angeles while he was on Cheers. When a caller asked him what it was like to be on Cheers, his glib and nasty response was, to quote, "It's brutal, I have to kiss Rhea Perlman." And then Burrows says, that was it. He insulted Rhea, which meant he insulted all of us. He crossed the family. Jay was fired unceremoniously. And that's very true to what I'd heard from various sources. I had heard some people say that Rhea Perlman had stormed into the writers' offices or Burrows's and said, he needs to go now. I don't know if that happened, but I think it's very much more likely that this was the aftermath of him being very cruel to Rhea. And as Burrows said, he crossed the family. Everybody was there in support of Rhea Perlman. He was not getting away with being so nasty about her, and they wrote him out. So having been reviewing the episodes leading up to this, I've not really been able to express that because I didn't want to spoil the fact that Eddie was going to be killed off. And it does make it very difficult to watch the character, and the character has done nothing wrong. I think, well, no, up until this point, we don't think the character has done anything wrong. We'll expand on that in a moment. But it's very difficult to look at that character and like the character knowing the story behind why he was ultimately written out. So it's a very different experience watching it with that information. But I just wanted to share this primarily because, well, I've been desperate to talk about it since Eddie came into the show, but also because, as IMDb says, the trivia does suggest that that's not the truth. That's not why he was written out. But from Burrows' own words, that does seem to be the case. Back with the episode. We're in Cheers, it's dark, Carla's still in shock, Frasier talks about grief, and then he starts crying, remembering his late mother, which was quite emotional for me because 2 days ago, I think it was 2 days ago, I watched the episode of Frasier, Mamma Mia, which is about his mother. Well, kind of about his mother. And just to have that fresh in my mind, those really beautiful final few scenes with that episode, and then to watch this, it's definitely a really interesting experience watching Frasier and Cheers side by side. And then we cut to the funeral service. And there's another point here that I want to mention, but not necessarily with agreement. I'm kind of giving them the benefit of the doubt. He is referred to as Guy Eddie LeBec. And we actually learned, and I went back to get the quote from the episode, Call Me Irresponsible. Carla said, his real name isn't Edward, it's Guy. People just call him Eddie because it's too weenie to say Guy. And the trivia on IMDb, which I read before watching the episode in case there was anything I wasn't aware of, does point out that this is a goof, that they referred to him as Guy Eddie LeBec when Eddie's not his name. However, and I could be wrong, but I don't think we're ever told why he is called Eddie, so it is very possible that his middle name is actually Edward. So Carla would be right in saying his real name isn't Edward because it's Guy Edward. But then I guess if he was signing it Edward and going by Eddie, so maybe it's a goof, but maybe we can say actually it was his middle name, but never the name he went by. I don't know. I just thought it was worth discussing. And Eddie's wife is asked to step forward. And of course, Carla steps forward, as does another woman. And this is Gloria LeBec, played by DeSalvo. And it turns out he had another wife. And I really liked this part of the episode because initially I thought, okay, they're writing out Eddie LeBec because of, in theory, or allegedly because of something J. Thomas said. So why are they killing him off but making him a hero, saving somebody else? It seems quite strange to kill somebody off, I guess, for revenge, to get back at the actor, but then making him a hero in the process, for me, was a bizarre decision. But then, a few moments later, we learned that actually maybe he wasn't completely a good guy. He may have died a hero, but he married somebody else. And also, I'm assuming that the marriage wasn't legal, and we have just this absolutely chaotic scene. We find out that Gloria also had twins by Eddie, and it was a very, very messy funeral. Funny enough, but I think more fascinating than funny. And we cut to Cheers. Carla is smashing up glasses, and she asks Sam, what's wrong with me? What was wrong with him? To which Woody responds, how did he know which pants were in which house? Which I guess is a fair question, but maybe now is not the time, Woody. And then Gloria walks in and she says to Carla, I want to talk to you. And Carla responds, and this is brilliant, she says, yeah, I want to scratch you bald, paint your butt blue and mail you to Guam. Gloria says, I'd like to see you try. Norm quite excitedly gets up and says, yeah, I'd like to see that too, actually. Gloria approaches the bar, Frasier scurries away, really brilliant, and Gloria and Carla talk things out, kind of arguing, but it never gets that heated. We find out, and I hate this is disgusting, they're obviously trying to discuss which of them Eddie loved the most, and Gloria says, well, he loved me the most because he gave me this picture of his nephews, and she presents this picture, and it's a picture of Carla's kids. I hate that. That's absolutely disgusting. And then Thomas Haden Church comes in, which I rather loved. He is in Wings. He's absolutely fantastic in Wings. And in Cheers, he plays the penguin whose life Eddie saved. And he is actually delivering this note to Carla because one night Eddie told Gordie Brown, Thomas Haden Church's character, that if anything were to happen to him, he has to deliver this note to Carla because he has this secret, he's feeling really guilty, and I do like the fact that we do get some confirmation that Eddie did feel bad about what he did at the very least, and of course now that something has happened to him, Gordie is able to deliver this note, and we get to hear what the note says, and we basically learn that he had to marry this other woman because he made her pregnant, and he is sorry. And while I think the apology would never be enough, I don't think he had to marry somebody because he made them pregnant, because that marriage surely isn't legal anyway, so marrying her makes no difference. But nevertheless, at least he apologized. I think that was really nice for Carla. But I don't I don't forgive Eddie. Not that it's my place to forgive him, but that is certainly not enough. But I like the fact that Carla got an explanation and she got her apology. And she actually has a moment of compassion for Gloria. I guess as she realizes that Gloria is raising children presumably on her own, and Carla knows what that feels like, and she realizes they both have Eddie's kids. Their kids are related, and she actually offers Gloria to spend the night at her house so she doesn't have to travel back late on the bus, and she makes Cliff drive Gloria to her house. So she's not completely forgiven Gloria for, not that necessarily Gloria has anything to be forgiven for. I think the way she's spoken to Carla is unacceptable, but to be fair, the same with Carla as well. If neither of them knew the other person existed, then neither of them are really in the wrong. So I guess neither of them should be forgiving each other, because there's nothing to forgive apart from the fight they got into at the funeral. That wasn't acceptable. But either way, Carla still has some negative feelings towards Gloria because she decided to punish her by making Cliff drive her to her house. And Norm's happy because they got rid of Cliff a few hours early. And we end the episode with Carla deciding to go off and grieve in her own way. She goes to the pool room and she starts to sing "Oh Canada," and it got a tiny bit emotional, and it was I think a decent way to end the episode. And I'm so relieved we finally made it to this episode, because it has been so difficult to not talk about Eddie LeBec's fate, or indeed what J. Thomas said about Rhea Perlman in the episodes leading up to this. So I'm rather relieved that we got here in the end. I don't think I knew about the backstory for this episode the first time I watched it. I can't imagine I would have done, but certainly watching it now, it's a very, very different experience, and one that's certainly quite fascinating as a story itself. Had we not had the reason for it, and I don't remember if this is how I felt the first time I watched the show, but without that backstory, without that context, there's a good chance I would have said, why are you putting Carla through this again? Why are you just giving Carla heartache after heartache? But with this one, it was definitely the right decision. And yes, it's a funny episode, but they allow time for it to be quite emotional as well. And ultimately, Death Takes a Holiday on Ice is a very fascinating episode because of the backstory, the story behind its creation, but also in its own, definitely a decent episode of Cheers.